So can everybody hear me okay in the back? I'll try to. I know I have a very soft voice, so I'll work on that. I wanted to just take a few minutes and welcome you back and welcome you to day 2. This will be fairly short. This is just a one slide, and I don't even want to use the word presentation because I hope that's not the tact as you go through this leadership continuum that you're taking. Because leadership is not something that you could come to a 3-day course and have it all figured out. Leadership is not something that after a test and a practicum, we put a check in the box and you move on. It's so much more. And so if nothing else, after my welcome back to day 2, I hope you take it away as a challenge. Now this slide up here right now, I'm looking at a lot of midshipmen going, okay, we've seen this one. I put this up a lot when I talk to my midshipmen. My future, my relief. And as I look out in the audience right now, I also see my future and my relief. You're the next generation. And one of the things that personally, as a citizen of the United States, not just the Commandant, sometimes it's a little miffing to me when I read the press and I hear about our national soul and our future and all this doubt. I look in the eyes and I look in the hearts of each and every one of you out there, and I feel very confident in our future. And I feel very refreshed in our national soul. And I quite frankly tell people, if you got a question, come and spend a day with our midshipmen. And that doubt will go away. And as I look in this room, it's here as well. So, what is the challenge? The challenge is, as you go through these couple days, keep an open mind. But also keep a very questioning attitude. Why are they telling me that? Well, what does that mean? And not just to you individually, but then when you take these tools, and that's what they are, because whether it's the end of this course, or many of you will graduate from your respective institutions this year, you are not going to leave an institution or a course with a toolbox ready to go. And I can use the graduation analogy. It's called commencement for a reason. It's a beginning. And so the key here is we're kind of giving you the start of the Craftsman toolbox for those of you that works on cars. But you're not going to have your whole ratchet set by the time you leave here, definitely by the time you graduate. You might have, a couple sockets here and there and maybe a hammer and screwdriver. But it's going to be the life lessons that you learn, the interactions that you have in your classrooms, on your athletic fields, and also socially in your respective communities that'll help fill this toolbox. But the key that unlocks that toolbox, the key that'll make those tools useful, and not just for you, but for your generation, is how you utilize them. And that goes to the first point, and I call this potential for excellence. I'm a huge believer in this, and quite simply it means this. Every single one of us has it. Everyone has it. But what differentiates each and every one of you is who's willing to sacrifice, who's willing to endure, and who's willing to focus to reach their potential for excellence. Not just individually, but collectively. So as we talk about here, what are your goals? As you sit here, and today we talk about creating a culture of leadership. Yesterday we had some great speakers. What do you want to get out of this? And more importantly, how are you going to improve? How are you going to improve? For sitting here, for traveling all this distance, for interacting with your peers from across the nation, how are you going to improve? With that, I also tell our midshipmen, I'm a simple guy. If I can't spell it, I don't use it. If I fish with it, I usually don't eat it. And I'm used to very short sound bites. And my house is quite simple. It's built on 4 pillars. And those pillars are education, empowerment, inspiration, and accountability. So as leaders, as you listen to this conference, remember that everything has to be in balance. If all I do is educate, and in my own mind, empower, but there's no accountability. And accountability doesn't necessarily mean some type of system where fault happens and you come before and you're adjudicated and move on. Accountability is, how is your guidance operationalized? What metrics are you putting in place to make sure that your goal and your vision is being executed properly? If there's not that balance, if you don't have those pillars working in conjunction, the house falters. And so I go back to the question, why are you here? Why are we here? What's going to change when you leave? After you hear about a culture of leadership. We had some great discussions yesterday. I stayed here for Mr. Buckingham. I hope that generated thought. It certainly did with me. You know, that's one definition of leader versus management. You know, what's your definition? And I guess we just got back power. Either that or I've got an echo in the back. What's your definition or yours? That's just as important. Because again, Marcus isn't going back to Boston University. Marcus isn't going back to Tufts. Marcus isn't going into the workplace. Marcus is not going into an air squadron or into a field command. You are. How many of you seen the movie White Man Can't Jump with Woody Harrelson? Raise your hand. Okay? And so here's the analogy. There's that scene where they're driving in the car, and they got Jimi Hendrix playing. And he says, you know, I'm listening to Jimmy. And he goes, I know you're listening to Jimmy, but you're not hearing Jimmy. To be effective, you've got to hear and not just listen. And so how are you going to take that back? And again, don't get caught up in what I call finish line mentality. Well, hey, I got all my notes down. I'm ready to go. I really understood the speakers. I'm done. I'm a leader. Or, you know, I just graduated from Tufts University, the Air Force Academy, or I graduated from West Point. Where's Boston University? You're near and dear to my heart because that's where I blew my knee out. I guess you don't even have a football team anymore. Okay, I remember that field well. But so when I graduate as a Terrier, I'm a leader. I'm ready to go. Just a beginning. Just a beginning. This next bullet, it says leadership development of all midshipmen. Get rid of midshipmen. Put leadership development of the next CEO, the next CFO, the next battalion commander, the next commander of the 82nd Airborne, the next commander of the composite wing, our next president. Put whatever you want in there. But the bottom line is how are you training your reliefs? How are we educating, empowering, and inspiring our reliefs? You see, it's a cycle. And here's a shock to y'all. Someday you will be as old as I am. Okay? It's going to happen. What are you doing now to make sure that your legacy continues on? What are you doing now to make sure our culture, our nation, our future remains strong and is even better for having you being a part of it? It's never too late to think about that. My old football coach used to say, George Welsh, you either get better or you get worse, you never stay the same. And there's a lot to that. I say be a shipmate and a leader. That's what it boils down to me. And what does that mean, being a shipmate? That means looking out for others. That doesn't mean holding hands. That doesn't mean taking the case of personal accountability. But what it does mean, it means intrusive leadership. It means taking the time to understand who you are working with, who you are working for, and most importantly, who's working for you. One of the things that Marcus brought up yesterday, one of the midshipmen asked, I understand as a leader you say to make it very clear who you serve, and you say we serve the country. That's true in a very broad sense. But again, just like I mentioned when I started with, this is not a checklist where you go through and, oh, I got leadership down pat. It is a continuum. It is reestatable. And for you English majors, that means it kind of changes. For your engineers, I'm probably using the wrong term, but you get the point. And the reason I bring that up is as a second lieutenant, as an ensign, as a new project manager, you serve your subordinates. That's who you serve. If as a leader you show up and for your time being there, you don't remove barriers, you do not improve efficiency and effectiveness from a personal and a professional standpoint, you do not make the place that you came to better when you leave, It goes back to bullet number 2. Why were you there? What did you do? When I was Commodore Submarine Squadron 4, I used to tell my commanding officers, if I were king, the fitness report, and that's something how we critique each other, how we self-assess, the only one that would matter would be one I would write on you 6 months after you leave. Because did you create the culture? Did you create that atmosphere where your legacy lives on? I had several commanding officers, they'd have problems in certain areas, they'd come to me, they'd go, Commodore, you know, we're having a real hard time in engineering because my A division, that's auxiliary division, are a bunch of bad apples. I can't, you know, they're bad apples. And I'd say, shipmate, it has nothing to do with rotting fruit. It's the barrel maker. And that's you. And so the next time you think you have problems in an organization, the next time you think you can't achieve because of your bad apples, take a look at the culture. Take a look at the forethought you've put in. Take a look at your mentorship, education, empowerment, inspiration. And if you have a sound barrel, guess what? Your apples are not going to rot. They're not going to rot. Understanding through ownership. What does that mean? Okay, I guess I own it. It means getting out and about. Understanding not only what your direction is, what your vision is, but going back to how's it being operationalized? And is it getting communicated properly? Communication is good. More communication is better. A lot of communication is really good. Transparency is very important. Being very clear and concise and taking feedback. So it goes back to that Woody Harrelson movie. Are you just speaking or are you communicating? And there is a big, big difference. Big difference. And again, as you sit through this, this conference, and this last bullet, you might say, okay, what does that mean? Ethical foundation. Why is it important as a leader? Why is it important as I sit through this conference that I have an ethical foundation? As leaders now, which you are, each and every one of you, because they're subordinates, whether it's in a class system at a service academy, whether it's in a class system at an institution, whether it's that lab partner you have. There's always a place where leadership can be applied. Again, because it's not about you. It's how do you improve others around you. But to do that, there's got to be some type of baseline foundation. There's got to be a sense of trust when that person looks at you and says, okay, I understand. I got it. And it's not that they understand that the equation you just gave them was absolutely spot on, or it's not that they understand that what you told them that you wanted them to do makes all the sense to them, but they understand it because they know that your ethical and moral foundation is sound, and you would not give them a direction, assistance, you call it what you want, that you did not believe, and they did not believe that it was done morally and ethically for the right reasons. And here's something I'm going to throw up real quick. And this is a critique on your generation. If you like it, great. If you don't, fine. But it goes back to keep an open mind. The biggest problem with your generation, and trust me, my generation had much more. We don't have time to go through all those. But yours is you think you can do it all by yourself. I don't need to ask for help because I can do it all. I had a 4.0 in high school. Not me. I'm using third person here. 4.0 in high school. I don't need to ask for help. You can't do it by yourself. You can't. There's power in numbers. And it goes back to education, empowerment, inspiration. When you can get others to do things that they didn't think they were capable of doing, when you can take a team and get them across a goal line, the goal line of life. You know, and here's a secret. Cuts and bruises, they're going to heal. Pain, it'll go away. Fancy medals, these will varnish over time. But legacy, truth, and vision will last a lifetime. Will last a lifetime. And the other thing, sometimes you're afraid of just going for it, challenging yourself and moving on because you're afraid of failing. Well, here's another bolt in the blue. You're going to fail. You are going to fail. You will fail many times. Trust me, I do. I mean, coming over here, I failed putting this thing on. But the beauty with failure, the great thing about that the good Lord gave us, is the fact that from failure comes enlightenment. And from enlightenment comes power, especially when that power, again, is channeled across a team. When others can learn from your mistake and you learn as well, you will make yourself and you will make others around you that much better. So today's section is a culture of leadership. And this is just one man's opinion. And again, I see some people taking notes, and that's okay. But again, keep an open mind. This is not, you won't get quizzed on this, and if you write down, well, hey, the Commandant said this, I figured leadership out. Because again, this is just a perspective. You've got to do what works for you. Even when Marcus talked yesterday, a different approach to the things he said is, managers, they work in the complex. They're kind of binners. They make sure that things are placated so execution can happen. Leaders, they're proactive. They're looking ahead. They're trying to empower, educate, and inspire others to do things individually, but more importantly, collectively, that they did not think they could do. And that's why the takeaway on this little slide is just that. In my simple world, that's a culture of leadership. That's a culture of leadership. Last thing I want to leave you. The other real important reason you're here is to build, I was going to use the term Rolodex, but as I watched everybody in the passageway, and I watched my young sons, Rolodex is probably right up there with dinosaur. So you're building your little tweet thing, cell phone deal, and that's important. That's important. The relationships you're making today may someday make a difference for your company, for your country. Real quick sea story, because just like my boss, we're Navy guys, so we got to give sea stories. I had a foreign exchange cruise as a midshipman with the Dutch Navy. My running mate was a guy named Hugo Amerlan. Hugo and I keep in touch to this day. Fast forward, Haiti kind of blew up many years ago, 15, 20 years ago. Operation Support Democracy, multinational force. I was a young 04 working for a flag officer in charge of the U.S. forces. Then Lieutenant Commander Amerlan was working for a Dutch flag in charge of their forces. How powerful was that, where I could pick up a phone and not call the Dutch Naval Forces operations officer from the current operations officer for the U.S. forces, but I could give Hugo a call from Bob and say, so how's your boss thinking through this? Here's how my boss is kind of thinking through this. Goes back to that trust. Goes back to that understanding. Goes back to those life lessons we learned as midshipmen. Not sitting here taking notes, but at sea together, in the classroom together, and out in town. Do not ever, ever underestimate the power of personal contact and personal understanding, and you're building that today. Today. So to wrap up, we talked about what I think environment is, what I think hopefully you're going to get out of this as you keep an open mind. But quite frankly, it's not about me or what I think. And if you can think about this question as you go through here, and if you can think about this question as you continue on through your careers and your lives, you'll be better people for it, you'll be better professionals for it, and you'll be better warriors for it. But most importantly, the men and women that are going to count on you will be much better for it. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the conference and continue to build your tweet things. And do not underestimate that power. Thank you very much.